Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher, honored and humbled to be with you once again, especially humbled by the fact that I am again all alone here in my apartment doing this for you guys. I'm starting to feel like no one wants to play with me, and I'm trying very hard not to take it personally. I'd like to think that I'm just, getting punked or something. But once again, no one is able to join me. And so we are going to continue reviewing the final table of the WSOP main event. Before we get into that, I want to thank you guys for all of the tweets and all of the love that you've been sharing of late. I have been on Twitter telling everyone about my, let's just say, frustrating experience in dealing with Bally's Las Vegas's non-existent customer service / risk management division. In their minds, nothing happened last month, so I'm not sure what all the fuss is about, because apparently I was not burglarized, and someone like me doesn't even deserve the courtesy of a phone call. So yeah, I have yet to hear from anyone there. It's been over a month now since this unfortunate crime occurred on their property, and I have heard not one word from anyone about it. So I'm now in the process of finding an attorney. So thank you guys for your recommendations. If anyone has not tweeted at me yet with your favorite Las Vegas attorney that I can get to help me hold Bally's responsible for what went on last month, when, for those who haven't listened to previous episodes, very quickly, I left my hotel room to go play poker, and when I came back, a lot of my stuff was missing. So it was a pretty clear case of burglary, and the police came, we did a report, security came up, and, they told me that I would be hearing from someone from the hotel. It seems ridiculous to me that it's been over a month. Furthermore, they haven't responded to any of my tweets or my phone calls. When I call and I say I want to speak to risk management, they patch me through to a voicemail, and then I leave the details, and no one calls me back. So that feels good as a longtime customer to be treated that way. Obviously, that's a great feeling. So anyway, enough about that. You guys have heard that for weeks now, but it is an ongoing saga, so I want to keep those who are remotely interested in it up to date on what's going on. So what else is going on? I'm about to leave, actually, this weekend, Saturday, April 13th. I will be flying down to Florida, where I plan to participate in the Seminole Hard Rock Poker Open, which is a big $5 million guaranteed tournament at the Hard Rock in Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood area. So I'm really excited to play that event. A lot of people I know are in Reno for Run It Up Reno, so that means I might have a good chance of playing against people I don't know, which generally speaking, when I don't recognize my opponents, that's a good sign, because I think that I know basically everyone that's in the very, very top echelon of poker, although I'm sure that there's somebody that's like an online crusher that once in a while will show up at my table, and it might take me a while to figure out that I'm playing against a world beater. But typically I know before the cards are even dealt whether I'm a favorite in the game or not. So I'm hoping to go to Florida and see a lot of unfamiliar, unsuspecting faces at my table. And wish me luck, guys. I'll be playing in a couple of events down there. So let's get right into it. We have been going over the World Series of Poker final table for the last several weeks. This actually dates back to last October when I first started reviewing, or maybe even September when we were reviewing the coverage as it was being shown on ESPN. Obviously, we had a lot of other stuff going on, and we kind of got behind as far as trying to keep up with the weekly broadcasts. But if you're interested in watching and reviewing these hands for yourselves, I recommend you get a subscription to Poker Go. It's like $8 a month or something like that. It's like a ridiculously low price, and you can get so much poker content. You could literally never watch it all. And a lot of it is from the World Series and other prestigious events around the world. So, and they're not paying me to say that. I'm a big fan of the product. I have done some work for them as an announcer, but I don't get a kickback, or I don't have a promo code to give you that would show them that you you found out about them because of this podcast. It's just me as your friend telling you that if you're not a Poker Go subscriber, you're doing it wrong. So we're down to 7 players, and we've gotten to 7 players fairly recently. The blinds are still at 400, 800 with a 100 ante. So there is 1.9 million in the pot before the cards are even dealt. Aram Zobian, who has been a very short stack through much of this final table, has recently doubled up. And he is on the button in this hand with the Queen of Spades, 10 of Hearts. So he's got Queen 10 offsuit folded to him on the button at a 7-handed table. He's got 32 million behind, and he's right in the middle of the pack. I think he's in 4th place at this point. He opens, as I think pretty much all of us would. He makes it 1.8 million, which has been, for better or for worse, the standard raise size at this table for this blind level. So he makes it 1.8, and Joe Cata, so the small blind folds, and then Joe Cata in the big blind defends with the King of Clubs, 8 of Clubs. Cata has Zobian covered by about 10 million chips, so we are playing Zobian stack, which again is 32 million. So we've got 40 big blinds is one way of looking at it. I like to think of it in terms of M. So our M is right around 17. So we have some maneuverability, however you look at this, especially with this small raise to start things off. We have a lot of wiggle room before we get anywhere near pot commitment. And the flop comes. So, yeah, Cata calls, and now heads up. The flop comes Ace of Clubs, Jack of Spades, Deuce of Clubs. And with 4.7 million in the pot, Cata, who has flopped a flush draw with the King 8 of Clubs, checks it over to Zobian, who bets only 1.4 million into the 4.7 million pot. Now, I know I've been harping for the last several weeks on sizing being too small for my liking, and I'm going to harp again, guys, so feel free to fast forward if you want. I don't understand what this bet does for us. If you have an ace and there's a club draw out there and any number of possible straight draws, you should be betting bigger to protect your hand. If you are bluffing, you really can't get anything to fold, unless it's something like pocket fours or something like that. It would have to be a next to nothing hand. So maybe that's the goal of this bet, is to try to bluff Cata off of a small pocket pair. I'm not a fan of this bet sizing. I would much prefer a half pot bet here, which would be pretty standard if you had a top pair, which I think is the easiest hand for Zobian to represent, having opened from the button, and now when the ace comes, you can just go ahead and bet half the pot. If Cata is not paying attention to bet sizing, then there's no problem with betting 1.4 million, but I think it would be a mistake to assume that a player of Joe Cata's caliber didn't notice that you just bet like 20% of the pot. Okay, fine. It's more like 28%, but still, you guys get the point. This bet is too small to do any job. So to me, I'm not a fan of this. I know it's a trend. I know it's what a lot of players are doing, both online and live nowadays, but I think it's a trend we're going to see go away very soon because it just doesn't get the job done. And not to belabor this, guys, but what do you think Aram Zobayan would have bet if he had something like ace, queen of hearts, and the flop comes ace of clubs, jack of spades, deuce of clubs? I think he would bet a lot bigger than 1.4. I'd be surprised to see anyone bet that small into 4.7 million with top pair, because you're pricing people in to call you with a gut shot, to call you with a flush draw, to call you with a lot of combos, call you with jack 10 even. You know, it's pretty much the right price to even call with second pair. So I really don't like the sizing. Enough about that. Cata just calls. Now, this to me is interesting. He's flopped the king high flush draw on this board, and his opponent makes a very weak, small bet, a 28% of the pot bet on this flop. And Cata, who only has king high, of course he's got a flush draw as well, doesn't pounce on that with a big semi-bluff raise. And I think that one reason why Cata might decide to just flat this bet is because he has a draw to the nuts, for one thing, and often it's correct to not semi-bluff with a draw to the nuts. Another reason he might do that is because he doesn't want to raise and reopen the betting in case Zobayan is making this tiny bet with a monster, hoping to get raised. So, I mean, I think that's kind of far-fetched. I don't think you'll see play that fancy at the main event final table generally, and certainly not with this lineup. So I don't think Cata has much to worry about, and I think that in his shoes, I would normally just raise and take it with my king high. He does elect to call, and this means I don't really like the way either player played the flop. The turn is the 4 of spades, which doesn't really change anything. I guess the 5 tray got there, and there are now 2 clubs as well as 2 spades on the board. Now here's where things kind of get interesting. Cata, with the nut flush draw, checks again, and this time Aram Zobayan bets 5.1 million into the 7.5 million pot. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. If you want to tell me that the point of betting small on the flop is to see whether your opponent has a big enough hand to check raise, and then, assuming it's just a call or even potentially a fold on the flop, then you can always bet big on the turn. Like, I can see where that could be a line that makes sense. And I have actually seen this of late in some of the, especially the higher limit cash games that I've played in the last few months. I've noticed a lot of players really betting a tiny amount on the flop, almost begging to get called or raised, and then shutting the whole hand down on 4th Street, which I think is what Zobayan will do in this case every time Cata doesn't have at least a pair of aces. I don't think Cata can call this bet on the turn with a pair of jacks. Obviously, he's totally priced out of calling with any type of straight draw, flush draw. Maybe if he had specifically the 5 tray, no, the king queen, maybe, yeah, like a king queen of clubs or queen 10 of clubs. Those are hands that Cata might be able to justify calling this really large bet because he's got multiple outs, the flush outs as well as the straight outs. But even then, for a bet this size, he's barely getting the right price, assuming he's got some type of implied odds to back it up. So things just get a little bit too murky here for Kata, and he folds. Now, I don't mean to be results-oriented, but I think when you flop a flush draw and your opponent bets so small, it might be better to go ahead and end the hand on the flop with the big check raise. It wouldn't even have to be that big a check raise. I mean, if the 1.4 million means what I think it means, namely that Zobian doesn't have much, or he would have bet more, then why don't you just go ahead and put in a raise to let's say 5 million. So he makes it 1.4 million, and then you raise to 5 million, and now you're going to win the hand so often. And another reason I like this play is because certain cards could come on the turn that would allow Kata to continue the semi-bluff. For example, say a 10 of diamonds. Now he would have a gut shot with a queen as well as the flush draw, and that would certainly be a card that Kata could continue barreling on the turn. I just think poker is so much easier when we take the lead in the hand rather than being the one calling and checking and calling. It's just you open more doors to being outplayed with that type of approach. So I found that hand interesting because it's the first time Zobian really had chips at this table, and he showed us all with that hand that he knew what to do with a stack. So a little while later, at the same blind level, still seven-handed, Tony Miles under the gun with pocket kings. He's got the two black kings, and he has been fairly tight at this table. Tony's image at this table, I think, is a tight image. He's been a nice guy, kind of friendly, talking to everybody, but when he's in a pot, he takes forever to make decisions, and he generally decides to fold. So he's one of these take forever and then fold types, which may come into play as you'll see in a moment. So anyway, he's got the kings under the gun, seven-handed. He opens to 1.8 million, so that has been the standard bet, and he didn't change it just because he had a premium hand. He's got 41.8 million behind, which means that his M is about 22. And Michael Dyer in the cutoff has ace of spades, king of diamonds. So it folds to Dyer in the cutoff. Now, Dyer has been the chip leader forever. He's got 135 million. The next highest stack is only about 68 million. So he is absolutely crushing this table. He's got like 40% of the chips with 7 players left. It's kind of crazy. And it's been this way for quite a while. Now, Dyer has gotten here, as you know, if you listen to previous episodes or watched it yourself, through very aggressive play. He's been 3-betting, 4-betting, taking it down anytime somebody checks, he bets. He's been a very, very aggressive force at this table, which is why it's so surprising that he chose to just call with the ace-king. So let's talk about this. How many of us would ever put ace-king into our late position calling range? Now, I understand that the open came from early position. All right, I'll grant you that. But it's not like it came from early position at a full table. It's not like he was under the gun at a 10-handed table or a 9-handed table. This is a 7-handed table. So I give kudos to Michael Dyer for just keeping his wits about him in a situation when many of us wouldn't be able to. And what I mean by that is, I don't know how many of you play the loose aggressive style, but if I'm at the late stages of a tournament and I have a large stack, this is my favorite type of poker, which is I'm going to take every pot that nobody else seems to want because my stack is so big nobody really wants to mess with me. I like being in that position. I feel like it's easier to accumulate chips. In general, it's easier to win when you're winning. Put it that way. And I found that to be true in cash games as well, for whatever reason. So when you've done more than your share of raising and re-raising and re-raising over the last 3 days, and that everyone has now been able to go back and watch how you played for the last several hours and all day yesterday, and you know that your table image is this guy likes to 3-bet with hands like 6-4 of hearts, to just have the presence of mind to just call with the ace-king, possibly because you're suspicious that your opponent has a monster, which would be a result of having observed him for hours now, trying to stay out of the way, and probably never getting out of line from under the gun, even seven-handed. So kudos to Michael Dyer for just flatting here and not getting into a raising war with ace-king, which is a very strong hand at a full table, but even stronger at a seven-handed table. But he just flats, and everyone else gets out of the way, so the two see the flop heads up, and it comes ace of hearts, 7 of hearts, 5 of spades. Now, it's easy for the commentators to say something like, well, when you're running good, you're running good. It's a good thing Michael Dyer didn't 3-bet before the flop, or Tony Miles would be in a world of trouble. Now, all these kind of comments, and it's all true, but to me, the beauty of it is not what came on the flop. It's just the fact that Michael Dyer didn't end up getting his stack in pre-flop, which stacks are such that it would be hard to do. But, what's your reaction in Dyer's shoes if Miles opens to 1.8 and then you have ace-king, which for most of us is an automatic 3-bet 80% of the time in most situations. So you make it, what, 5 million-ish with your ace-king, and then Miles comes over the top for, what, 13 million? And remember, we're only playing 42 million effective, basically. So that's almost a third of his stack. And then what, are you supposed to just flat and try to see a flop with ace-king? Like, I can really see where a lot of us would get into big trouble with the ace-king. Now, we now know that the ace is coming on the flop, yada, yada, yada. That's results-oriented. My point is, Dyer didn't get a lot of chips in before the flop as a 70% underdog, which is about what you are with ace-king against kings. So, good work. Now the flop comes ace-7-5 with 2 hearts, and there's 5.5 million in the pot. Miles puts in a continuation bet, 2.5 million. It's a little small, but it's fine. It's not as obscene as some of the flop bets we've discussed recently. Dyer calls, and he kind of gives off a tell. If you watch this clip, he kind of pretends to be annoyed as he flicks in the 2.5 million with a different type of flourish than he normally would have. I think at that point, Dyer is hoping that Miles has a hand like ace-jack. Obviously, you want your opponent to also have an ace whenever you have ace-king, and it comes ace-high. So, yeah, he calls, and I did notice a little something. It's a little hard to describe, but if you watch, it's kind of like an annoyed call that seems like an actor to me. Now on the turn with 10,500,000 in the pot, the 9 of hearts comes, which puts 3 hearts on the board, and Miles checks over to Dyer, who bets 5.2 million, half the pot, and Miles takes way too long before he folds. I mean, look, Tony, you can't beat any ace. You can't beat any flush. You're not going to check raise bluff, turn your kings into a bluff. You're folding. 100% you're folding. So just fold and let's play another hand. Anyway, don't waste time in poker tournaments, guys. None of us are getting any younger. There's no face to be saved, okay? And there's no stalling for other tables to bust so you can climb the stupid ladder, okay? You're done. Check, bet, fold. Let's move on. Sorry, everyone. I think all tournaments, and in fact, all sports, perhaps all things in life, should have a shot clock. Okay, guys, let's do one more hand from the final table. Here, 6 players left, so someone busted out. It was Alex Linsky that we discussed on the podcast before. So we're down to 6 players. So people are really starting to feel like they have a shot at the bracelet if anyone can move the mountain that is Michael Dyer. Folded to John Sin in the cutoff, and he's got about 65 million behind, so he's in very healthy shape with an M of 34-ish. He's got an 8 of hearts and a 6 of hearts, and he opens to 1.8 million, which is the standard bet and has been for almost 2 hours as we reach the final minutes of this level. The button folds, and then Nick Mannion, who has just been taking a beating all day. He started the day with something like 120 million. He's all the way down to 67 million, which, by the way, at this point was still good for second place out of the remaining 6. So all the chips were up top. Nick Mannion was barely in second. Sin is right on his heels with 65 million. Mannion with 67 million. And, of course, at this point, Mr. Dyer has like about 150 million and is running away with the tournament. So Mannion, I don't want to tell you what Mannion has, but he 3-bets to 5.5 million. So it folds back to Sin with the 8-6 of hearts. And Sin has a decision to make. There's now 8.7 million in the pot. And it only costs Sin 3.7 million to call. So he's getting about 2.3 to 1, just in my head. Please don't send angry letters if my math is a little off there. He's getting well over 2 to 1 to call, put it that way. He's got 8-6 of hearts. And Mannion is in the small blind, so Sin has position. Now, Nick Mannion hasn't been the type to 3-bet light. That doesn't mean that he can't 3-bet light. It's just, he's kind of struck everyone as an amateur player that kind of bets when he has it and checks and folds when he doesn't get too far out of line, doesn't seem to have a lot of tricks up his sleeve, and has largely been overmatched and frustrated having Michael Dyer 2 to his left all day, as any of us would, because not only was Michael Dyer playing great, he was running like God. So every time somebody tried to go up against him, he seemed to flop top pair or better, which doesn't make things any easier. With all that said, Nick Mannion has been completely beaten down and is still in second chip position. All that considered, I don't think I could fold. And maybe I should. And maybe this is a hole in my game. Maybe I have a leak that I like to see too many flops. The commentators were even saying that this is a really big 3-bet from Mannion. But it actually isn't. I mean, a pot-sized bet at that point would have been closer to $8 million. And that's a tough bet to call. For me, if he did a PLO, if he just had pot, then that would be a tough bet to call in position with the 8 of hearts, 6 of hearts. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't do anything like that. And to me, it just feels like a pretty easy call and see a flop. It's not like we're so short stacked that we can't afford to speculate. I mean, you guys have an M of 34 that we're playing here. I don't really understand, 80 big blinds. So I don't get it. I mean, Sin has to know that his skill edge over Nick Mannion is considerable. He's been playing against him for several days now. He knows that Mannion is much more likely to make mistakes than he is. He also has position, and he has a hand that when it flops well, it's almost impossible for your opponent to put you on having it. With all that in mind, plus the perfectly reasonable 2.3 to 1 that he's being offered from the pot, I think it should be a no-brainer call. Obviously, John Sin is the main event champion, and he beat 7,800 opponents to get there, so I don't want to say that he doesn't know what he's doing. And I have been quite complimentary of his play in general on this podcast and in life. I just don't get this one. Now, if the 3-bet had come from a tough player, from Michael Dyer, or if I somehow wouldn't have position on the flop, like if there was some other variable at play here, then I could understand the decision to fold. But this one, ever since I saw it, has bewildered me to the point where I don't get it. Maybe it's just that's what happens at the main event final table, which is why it takes 3 days to play and why heads up lasts 12 hours. Maybe just the structure is too good. But anyway, Sin lays it down. After much deliberation, it's not like he snap folded. I don't get it. I don't understand. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about a discussion I started on Twitter. It actually started with a joke, but it kind of got into a little bit more of an actual discussion. The joke was basically professional tournament player says, "Oh, I love playing this tournament. The structure is so good." And then fast forward to that same player buying into that tournament 9 hours after it started. So, I mean, I think what pros always mean when they use the phrase good structure is that it's a slow tournament. To me, there is an inflection point where a tournament can be so slow that it actually hurts your bottom line. Now, obviously, that's not true of the main event. I'll play 2-hour levels, for 3 weeks if it leads to me winning $9 million. But most tournaments that have these really long, really slow structures don't have anywhere near $9 million up top, and you just end up destroying your hourly by sitting in this tournament where people can fold in spots where they'd have to give action in a faster structure. Maybe we've gone too far with this idea of good structure equaling really slow structure and letting people buy in on day 2 with 100 big blinds. It just seems silly at some point that we're actually taking the action out of poker. Why should I call with 8-6 of hearts when I have an M of 34 and there's 6 players left and a couple of them are probably going to bust in the next level or two, and I'll win an extra $1 million? It's just there's not enough incentive to get after it. Now, that said, John Sin was definitely playing this tournament to win, which is why this confused me so much. Tony Miles had been making a lot of folds that I thought were designed to help him ladder up. But Sin, since this table started, has been playing aggressive poker where he's trying to get after it and seemed to be playing for the bracelet. So this play kind of bewildered me a bit. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that slower equals better across the board in tournament poker? Or do you agree with me that at some point we need to get this game moving? I'm not talking about the main event anymore, guys. I'm talking about in general, based on that tweet that I wrote that led to a discussion, because someone argued back with me saying, well, what about if the pro has a lot to do that day and he likes the structure because he's able to buy in later? I'm like, well, yeah, but then you don't really have time for the tournament. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it always better to have a slow structure? Because to me, it's synonymous. The pros I know who talk about structure, every time they say a tournament has a bad structure, they mean the blinds go up too fast or you don't start with enough chips. If you lose a pot or two, you feel short stacked. And every time they say it's a good structure, it's a tournament that's going to take forever to finish. And while we have a few minutes here at the end before we wrap up this episode, I also want to commend the World Series of Poker for responding immediately to a tweet by Dutch Boyd. Dutch Boyd tweeted about this event that they're doing this summer, which is a $1,500 no-limit hold'em bracelet event at the World Series, only open to players who have won bracelets in the past. And Dutch's point, which is a good one, was why would we play this event where there's only going to be a couple hundred players? You're taking full rake. You're not adding anything to the prize pool. And there's going to be a lot of really good players because they've all won bracelets. Presumably some of them know how to play poker. Why would anyone play this tournament? Don't act like you're doing us a favor. And immediately, the World Series of Poker tweeted back at him and said, you know what, Dutch, you're right. I think they even used the phrase, our bad. And they changed it right away. That tournament is now rake-free. I mean, I don't think they're going to add 50,000 to first place or anything, but just having it rake-free is a nice touch. When you're trying to do something for the players, you have to do something for the players. And from where I sit, as critical as I can be of the World Series of Poker as an organization, of the Rio as a destination, and of a lot of things surrounding the summer in Vegas, I have to say that once in a while they get it right. And to just see that some fair criticism was made and then instantly corrected by someone who's actually given the authority and the power to do so. Presumably Jack Effel was behind the decision. I love it. And I wish that this would happen more often. Look, companies and leagues and whoever else, organizations, if you get fair criticism, maybe just take a step back and say, this is something I can fix right now, so let's do it, because it makes me look good and it makes my players happy. It makes my customers happy. And this is what I complain about a lot throughout the summer. I sometimes feel like people forget who the customers are. The players are the customers. We are funding the whole thing. So please don't act like you're doing me a favor, like, oh, we're going to have a $1 million prize for this event. You're not doing me a favor, okay, because we all put in our money, and that's why the prize pool is what it is. So I really respect the fact that they got this one right. So kudos for that. Some breaking news, I can't really call it news yet, but there are several sources that are reporting, I can't confirm this, but that the Rio is going to be demolished, that someone is going to buy it and tear it down. I don't know when this would happen. If it happens in the next month or two, it's really going to change what what our summer looks like for sure. But this is something that, as I'm recording this, is kind of blowing up on Twitter right now. Probably by the time you listen, more information will have gotten out about what exactly is happening. But many of us have long fantasized about the World Series of Poker being almost anywhere else other than at the Rio. And the reason it is at the Rio right now is because they're one of the few casinos owned by that company that can accommodate an event of this size, just in terms of square footage and available space. So it would be interesting if this were to happen before or during the World Series of Poker. What a nightmare it might be to try to find a place to hold the World Series. So we'll see what happens with all of that. Now, with the last couple minutes here, just to update you guys on my baseball bet with David Tuckman. And, of course, I'm on the same side as Norman Chad, my fellow Marylander. The Orioles are currently a 5-8 team. So they are on pace to win the bet, help me win the bet. Again, I just need them to lose fewer than 102 games this summer, and I'm good as gold. Yeah, it might come down to the wire. The team does not look very good, as none of us really thought they would. The pitching has been atrocious. David Tuckman, to his credit, has not been gloating very much. So I really want to thank him, because we do have a large bet, as I mentioned, on this, and it's great that I'm not going to have to hear from him every single time the Orioles lose a game. Hey, do you want to buy out? Whatever. So classy move, as the Orioles have lost 7 of their last 8 games. He has been relatively silent about the whole project, realizing, of course, that it's only April. It's a very long season. A lot can happen. Norman Chad, for his part, is milking this for all it's worth, pretty much tweeting every day how much he likes his side of the bet. And again, I think that Norman and David have their own wager, which is significantly smaller than the one that Tuck has with me, which makes it funny that Norman's the one talking trash, because it's just a relatively insignificant amount. However, I believe that in Norman Chad's world, even winning $5 from David Tuckman would feel like $1 million. So that's what's going on with that. So guys, please make sure that you subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or wherever else you find your podcasts. Let me give you a quick teaser, as we call it in the industry. We are going to have a big episode for you next week. And by big, I mean there will be more than one person talking. Yeah, that's right. The return of a guest, or even 2. Ooh, exciting. Wait, they still have plenty of time to cancel. But I think I can pretty much guarantee that next week you will hear a voice other than mine on the show. I've said too much already. So for everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you all so much for listening.
in Texas, please. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Carry mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Carry mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me. I love it. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, it's not rough, it isn't fun.